За состојбата во ОБСЕ, за македонско-бугарските тензии и промената на уставот која што треба да следува во следниот период, разговараме со американскиот амбасадор во мисијата на ОБСЕ во Виена, Мајкл Карпентер. Ambassador Carpenter, thank you for your time today.
It's good to be with you.
North Macedonia chairs OSCE in very difficult times. So, is the biggest challenge maybe for the organization now is maybe how to survive?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for the organization is Russia's war on Ukraine, and we're focused like a laser on that problem. And so this year, for the first time ever, we just created a new field mission that is purely funded through voluntary contributions that will help Ukrainians with things like demining and psychosocial support, and also creating a registry for the children who have been torn away from their families and involuntarily deported against their will to Russia. So we're doing things there, but the organization, I think, will survive. There are some challenges within the organization as well, but I think those pale in comparison with what's happening in Ukraine.
The Russian Federation sent messages to the Macedonian government to not act like Poland. What is your message?
Well, of course, the Russian Federation would send messages to any government demanding that it not stand for principles and that it not criticize Russia. But when Russia is violating all 10 principles of the Helsinki Final Act and the basic norms of decency, when its forces are committing mass atrocities in Ukraine, we have to speak up and we have to expose what Russia's doing. And on that score, I have to say, North Macedonia is just as solid as Poland was last year and has been chairing this organization very capably and based on the values that we share.
This month marks 1 year from the war in Ukraine. So how will the OSCE influence and maybe work with Kiev in the time when Russian Federation is also a member of OSCE?
Well, as I mentioned, what we've done this year is we've created this first ever field mission in Ukraine that is not subject to any Russian veto and that is funded entirely through voluntary contributions from like-minded states. And through this field mission, we have the ability to support Ukrainians at a time of war. As I mentioned, demining. For example, the area in Ukraine that has been mined by Russia's forces is twice the size of the country of Austria. And so we will help with that. We will help with providing psychosocial support, mitigating the enormous environmental risks from the war, helping Ukraine to build capacity to prosecute war crimes. These are the sorts of things that the OSCE can and will do in Ukraine in the coming weeks and months as we get projects underway. So I'm confident that the OSCE will play an important role in helping Ukraine.
Ambassador Carpenter, you visited North Macedonia last week. You were here in Skopje. You had a meeting with President Pendarovski. And this comes in time when there are a lot of tensions between Skopje and Sophia. What did you told to President Pendarovski? What were your messages?
Well, I told him that the United States strongly supports North Macedonia, and we see North Macedonia's strategic future in Europe, and we strongly support its EU membership, just as we supported its NATO accession years ago. And the path ahead politically is very challenging, but we will continue to stand with this government, including its chairpersonship of the OSCE, which is actually, I think, a good time for North Macedonia to be chairing this organization because it shows just how capable you are and what sorts of tools you can bring to bear to solve various conflicts and problems within the OSCE region. But we will support North Macedonia politically and ensure that it is a part of a Europe whole, free, and at peace, which has always been our overriding goal for the region.
After the Security Council, President Pendarovski said that the main problems and outbursts in Bulgaria are caused by people working for Russian interests. How has the USA noticed increased Russian influence maybe in Bulgaria?
Well, I think we have noticed, especially in social media, that the propaganda volume has really been increased. We saw this not incidentally as well in the lead up to the PRESPA agreement, where not only on social media, but also some real live actors were potentially being funded by outside interests. And so it's important to guard against this sort of malign influence, which is really not limited to North Macedonia, but is across the region, fairly widespread. And to really focus on the task at hand, which is building the country's future inside of Europe.
Bulgarian President Radev complains about these tensions, and actually he said this at Brussels in front of the member states of the European Union. He is demanding monitoring in North Macedonia for the Bulgarian minority, despite the fact that the Council of Europe did not see a problem here. Will official Washington have or will have talks with Bulgarian President Radev, and when?
Well, first of all, let me say that we see North Macedonia as a vibrant, pluralistic, multi-ethnic democracy. And we applaud North Macedonia for that fact. There was a conflict in 2001. The United States played an important role in preventative diplomacy from stopping that conflict from evolving into a war, and that was successful. And the country has made great strides in the intervening years. With regards to Bulgaria, look, I think my country is going to continue to engage with the leadership in Bulgaria. As you know, there's elections coming up soon, so the political situation is a little bit fluid there. But we will continue to engage and find a way for North Macedonia to proceed with its European integration and to bring both of these important NATO allies to a place where they're cooperating and advancing our shared interests of achieving a Europe whole, free, and at peace.
A few months ago, you mentioned it now, but also a few months ago, the government said that there is a Russian influence on political life in the country through certain sources of funding. Also, we must say that the confidence in EU in the country is falling drastically. So what will the United States do with this problem?
Well, look, I think it's very important to acknowledge that Macedonians have had a difficult process of joining NATO, and they face a difficult process of joining the EU, one in which various other conditions are lumped on to their membership criteria. That is difficult, but the country has been guided by experienced leaders who have made successful compromises thus far. For example, to have North Macedonia become a member of the NATO alliance, through which our two countries cooperate very, very closely. And I have no doubt that eventually North Macedonia will be a member of the European Union because it deserves to be in Europe. And we just need to find the political will to coalesce those parties that want to see a European future for North Macedonia around a common goal, and then continue to support the country against these sorts of propaganda and malign influence from the outside, which are very destructive, I might add.
Yes, but North Macedonia must change the constitution before the second intergovernmental conference with EU, and the opposition says that they won't vote for changing the constitution. What is your message to Macedonian opposition on this?
Well, look, it's not for me as a U.S. ambassador to tell Macedonian political parties what they should or should not do. But what I would say is that there is a strategic opening in the near future for North Macedonia to be anchored in Euro-Atlantic institutions. That is certainly our strategic interest and our aim, and we think it's to the benefit of the people of North Macedonia as well. And so we hope that this is not a time for politicking, but rather a time for coming together and finding a way forward that I think future generations will look back on as sort of being a decisive moment in the country's trajectory, just as the PRESPA agreement was applauded after it was concluded. And that wasn't easy either. So don't get me wrong, this period ahead is not easy politically, but it is one that has tremendous opportunity.
We will go on the theme corruption and the blacklist from United States. The American ambassador here, Aguilar, said that there will be several blacklists from official Washington. When should we should expect them?
Well, the United States has various authorities to sanction corrupt actors, and we have used those across the region throughout the Western Balkans, and I expect that we will continue to look to those authorities to make designations against individuals who are engaged in corrupt activities. Because look, at the end of the day, corruption is not just a tax on economic growth. It is not just an inefficiency that manifests itself in business. It is fundamentally a national security threat as well. And so we see this action to target corrupt actors as advancing the interests both of those countries where these actors reside, but also for the US and our European partners.
You said that it's a big problem. How can it be solved? We have a lot of corruption in the region.
Yeah, I mean, sanctions can help, but they're not the solution here. The solution here is to build capacity and rule of law so that local prosecutors and local institutions that deal with anti-corruption measures can be maximally effective in both preventing the temptation for corruption and then prosecuting it where it does arise. It's never easy, and no country, including my own, by the way, is immune to corruption. It's a constant struggle to support rule of law and judicial agencies against corrupt actors. But there are institutions that can help, and we know what those best practices are. There are many different examples of this. The OECD Anti-Bribery Convention is one. There are many others where we know what the model is, and it just has to be implemented.
Ambassador Carpenter, my last question is, can we expect some of the Macedonian officials to be on that blacklist?
Look, I would say this. No one is immune from prosecution for corruption, or should be. And the United States is not there to target any particular nationality. As I mentioned earlier, we have authorities that are granted to the president that allow for the designation of corrupt actors, particularly in the Western Balkans, and we'll continue to use those authorities and looking at all individuals that are implicated in corrupt acts.
Yes. Thank you for your time today.
You're most welcome.
Yes.